Cuba, 1959. Fidel Castro takes over the government and becomes a dictator of Cuba.
Everybody rolls with their fingers crossed.
Castro was born August 13, 1926 in Berrien-Orient into a wealthy farming family. He was baptized as a Roman Catholic and educated by Jesuits. While studying law at the University of Havana, he developed leftist anti-imperialistic views and participated in rebellions against right-wing governments. He participated in a Cuban revolution. The revolution succeeded, and he took charge of the military and political with this power as the prime minister. He converted Cuba to Marxism, which meant there was no social classes. He and the government controlled all sources and means of production.
Everybody got this broken feeling, like their father or their dog just died. Everybody talking to their partner.
During his early years in power, Castro turned the church into the enemy. He denounced Catholics and called them social scum, and by the late 1960s, Christmas was banned on the island. But exactly why did he have a quick change of heart? In the year of 1949, he was excommunicated from the church. Castro was angered by the church's denunciation of communism, and he acted upon his hatred by muzzling church publications and expelled many priests.
Give or take a night or two. Everybody knows you've been discreet, but there were so many people you just had to meet.
In 1961, Castro rounded up 130 priests. He placed them onto a freighter, and he shipped them to Spain, where they were not allowed to return to Cuba.
Everybody knows.
After the freighter incident, many more priests were imprisoned. And in 1976, Castro declared Cuba an atheist state.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows.
In his young life, while he was in prison, Castro often wrote letters. At one point, Castro wrote a letter to a father of one of his fallen comrades. In this letter, Castro wrote, "I will not speak of him as if he were absent. He has not been, and he will never be." These are not mere words of consolation. Only those of us who feel it truly and permanently in the depths of our souls can comprehend this. Physical life is ephemeral. It passes inexorably. This truth should be taught to every human being, that the immortal values of spirit are above physical life. What sense does life have without these values? What then is it to live? Those who understand this and generously sacrifice their physical life for the sake of good and justice, how can they die? God is the supreme idea of goodness and justice. In this quote, essentially, Castro is denouncing God and speaking of his beliefs on what comes after. The major things that Castro did to affect Catholicism in Cuba was he shut down all Catholic newspapers, he closed all Catholic schools, he caused 2,400 out of 2,800 members of the clergy to flee the country, and he forbid all Catholics to use press or radio. And for religious congregations, they were forbidden to teach and only allowed to work in ecclesiastical institutions. During Castro's reign and the reign of atheism, many Cuban Catholics left the country, but in 1991, Cuba began heading back towards the Catholic Church. By the end of 1991, Castro has the Constitution amended to redefine Cuba as a secular state. The Communist Party allows religious believers to become members. In 1996, Fidel Castro visits the Vatican. During a 35-minute meeting, the Cuban leader tells St. John Paul II, "Your Holiness, I expect to see you soon in Cuba." At that point, the Catholics knew that there was still hope left, and in 1998, St. John Paul II visits Havana and meets Castro. The Pope talked about human rights and blasted the lack of basic freedoms in Cuba. At that point, Castro reinstated Christmas as a national holiday. Nearly 15 years later, Pope Benedict IX visits Havana and meets Fidel, who had relinquished power to his brother Raul. After celebrating Mass on Revolution Square, Benedict requests that Good Friday also be recognized as an official holiday, and Castro begins to recognize Catholicism as a primary religion again in Cuba. In 2015, Castro met with Pope Francis, who was visiting Cuba and was on his way to the United States. However, on November 25th of 2016, Castro died, and his death was announced on state television by his brother Raul.